All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. Hello, welcome back to Daniel's Book Nook. I am Daniel, and today I will be talking about my journey, if you will, with Lord of the Rings and why it is my favorite fantasy series of all time. So first of all, I'll show you some of my special editions that I've collected. So here is the Silmarillion. This is illustrated by Tolkien himself. You can see here, this is his book on the history of Middle-earth, which is the world he created. And so this is a really good book. I've read it about 4 times. I do an annual Tolkien reread every year, which is the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and Lord of the Rings. So yeah, that's the Silmarillion. And then we have, again, illustrated by Tolkien, this gorgeous edition of the Hobbit, as you can see. And then I have the magnum opus here, which I just read from, which is the Lord of the Rings. See, it's got the slip case, and then I can take this off. It's the Eye of Sauron. So, what is my history with the Lord of the Rings? Well, when I was very young, I read The Hobbit. I believe I was maybe grade 5 or 6. I loved The Hobbit. It's a very simple story. It's just about a journey that a young hobbit named Bilbo goes on, and I don't know how much Tolkien planned to expand from there into Lord of the Rings, which is such a huge story. See, The Hobbit is not as big in scale as the Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit is a very quick story. It's just a quest, a very simple quest, not too high stakes. Whereas Lord of the Rings, I mean, this includes his invented languages, and there's just so much. So I read The Hobbit. I knew about Lord of the Rings. My parents, of course, it was their edition of The Hobbit I read, just an old paperback. And then I ended up borrowing the individual volumes of The Lord of the Rings. That book I just showed you, that's all 3 in 1, but these were individual volumes. And I remember reading The Fellowship of the Ring, the first book, that's what that quote was from. Reading Fellowship of the Ring and absolutely loving it. It was actually amazing. And then I don't know if I finished The Two Towers. I could never finish Return of the King at first. And then in high school, I ended up getting another edition. It was just like a bind up with all 3, kind of like this one, but not as fancy. And that's kind of when I ended up finishing Return of the King for the first time. And then, yeah, and then like even post high school, I kept rereading it. And eventually I determined, yeah, this is actually my favorite fantasy series of all time. And you have to understand, I've read tons of fantasy at this point. I've read all sorts of subgenres. I've read sci fantasy. But in the end, I mean, Lord of the Rings is just the best. You know, Tolkien created languages. He created a world that, if you read the Silmarillion, it even expanded more on that. Of course, the Silmarillion was, that was actually published after his death by his son. But, and he really wanted to get that out there, actually. He really wanted to publish the Silmarillion in his lifetime. It never happened. But for Lord of the Rings, why is it my favorite? I mean, it's got the epic battles, it's got a quest, it's got good characters, the world building is like the best in fantasy, I would say. For anyone who hasn't read either The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, I would say jump in with The Hobbit first. You kind of get the backstory of what hobbits are, and then read Lord of the Rings. It's a little daunting. The prose is kind of dense. I don't know, it's very, yeah, the language that's used is very old school, but it's so good. You know, people say he'll describe like a door and it'll take like 1 page because of how heavy his prose is. Yeah, that's kind of my history with Lord of the Rings. I will add, I believe it was 2002, they started adapting the movies directed by Peter Jackson, as you know, The Fellowship of the Ring in 2002, and then followed up by The Two Towers and Return of the King. These are, I would say, the best book to TV, book to movie adaptations of fantasy I've ever seen. I've seen other shows, and you know, people love Game of Thrones, but those Lord of the Rings movies were like amazing, and they actually took out quite a few things. they left out quite a bit of the books. There's whole sections that are missing, but it's still so well done. The casting was great, the visuals, so I'm sure a lot of you who haven't read the books have at least seen those movies. They're so well done. But yeah, I highly recommend Lord of the Rings, and yeah, it's just one of the best fantasy stories I've read, and I do a reread. I read Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and Lord of the Rings every year, and I'll keep doing that. And well, I guess that's about it. So please remember to like and subscribe, and you have a good day, and remember, you're always welcome at the Nook.